President, people in my home state are trying to figure out what they missed on this budget deal. It was announced by the White House today that this is a great job-creating achievement. But all they see is more spending and no change in the status quo. Everyone throws around numbers, but here's the one number the people in my state want to hear. How much does it save the American taxpayer? Put another way, does it help us balance our budget or to address the debt problems? We need two things to be able to balance our federal budget: spending restraint and a growing economy. Right now, we have neither. We have $18.5 trillion in debt, over $430 billion in deficit this year. To start paying down our debt, we have to first balance our budget. The presiding officer knows very well that we passed a budget earlier this year that took the next 10 years to be able to balance our budget. Now, let's just play pretend for a moment with this body. Let's just say we put that budget into place and over the next 10 years, worked down a little bit each year and got to a balanced budget 10 years from now. Just take a guess in this body. Let's say the year after that, we had a $50 billion surplus. It took us 10 years to get back to balance. Year 11, we had a $50 billion surplus. How many years would we have to maintain a $50 billion surplus until we paid off our debt? The correct answer would be 360 years in a row, we would have to have a $50 billion surplus to pay off our debt. Mr. President, we need to start doing budgets that actually deal seriously with what we're dealing with our debt and deficit. Today, our GDP growth was announced again. It's a whopping 1.5% growth in the American economy. With new regulations on every business, the assault on the American energy, new loan restrictions on banks, Obamacare cost increases, including in my state of Oklahoma, premium increases hitting 35% for next year on individuals. People know inherently that if you keep overspending, it limits our economic growth in America. We have fewer jobs because of it. It's harder to start a business because of it. The president keeps saying if we'll just spend a little more, we'll have more jobs. But people don't believe it anymore because they've seen that it's not true. After 6 years of just if we'll spend a little more, this will get caught up, we still have a 1.5% growth rate in the American economy. That's pathetic. While we have a great number of terrific people in the federal workforce, people inherently know if you just keep adding jobs in the federal workforce, it hurts our economy because it continues to take money out of the private hands and to put it into government control. What people want is not unreasonable. They just want a plan. People want to know that if we spend money, we use it efficiently, and there's a plan to be able to get us out of debt. What we heard through the negotiations was any increase in spending would be offset with pay-fors that were real. The spending negotiations that were done, we're supposed to develop that plan. What we have is a final document that's not a plan to get us out of debt. In fact, it increases our debt again. What we have is not a plan to be able to handle a long-term consequences of deficit. In fact, it obfuscates that again. What we need is a plan to deal with entitlements. And what we have is just a scratch at the surface on anything with entitlements. But what I heard over and over again is at least the pay-fors are real. That any increased spending that was done, at least there were offsets that were done. Well, let me give you a couple of examples of these real pay-fors as you actually read the bill. Here are a couple real pay-fors that are done. One of them is called pension payment acceleration. This is listed as one of the real pay-fors in the document. Pension payment acceleration in Section 502 changed the due date for pension premiums from October the 15th, 2025 to September the 15th, 2025 in order to get another $2.3 billion into the 10-year budget window. You see, this is all laid out to say in the next 10 years, we'll pay this off. So what they did is they took a payment that was due 10 years, 2 weeks from now, and moved it forward a month. So literally, yes, it adds $2.3 billion into the 10-year window, but if we had a 10-year plus 2-week time period, it would be exactly the same. It's actually zero savings. It's not real. They moved a payment a month and said that that's a pay-for. It's not a pay-for. That's the pension payment acceleration. How about this one? We have this one called the federal government called the Victims' Crime Fund. Victims' Crime Fund is money seized from criminals and designated not for general use, but to compensate the victims of crime, hence the name Victims Crime Fund. Apparently, this budget agreement qualifies, though, as a victim of crime because $1.5 billion is taken from the Victims Crime Fund and dedicated not to victims of crime, but to spending in other areas. We literally take $1.5 billion out of the Victims Crime Fund and spend it on the EPA, the IRS, and silent Shakespeare festivals that are out there in federal funding. So much for helping crime victims. We have 12 appropriation bills that we've done in the Senate. First time in a very long time the Appropriations Committee has done all 12 appropriation bills through committees. In this agreement, all 12 of those appropriation bills will have to be redone. Here's how they'll be redone. The defense bill will be cut. The other 11 will all go up in spending. Top of that, debt ceilings without reforms. The final straw for me in this deal to be able to look at it was Social Security disability. And the presiding officer knows full well that I've worked for 3 years on Social Security disability reform, knowing that the day was coming that we would have to fix Social Security. The CBO has warned us for 4 years that Social Security disability would reach insolvency in 2016. So my office has spent the last 3 years preparing how could we actually reform this program to make sure that we stabilize the Social Security disability program. I've interviewed individuals within the disability program, attorneys that work with it, federal judges, administrative law judges, representatives, Social Security staff in all those cubicles across the Social Security Administration office, advocacy groups, parents of the disabled. We did bipartisan hearings to look for common ground solutions and work with the Inspector General and the GAO to hear other practical solutions that they had discovered. We have a long list of real solutions to solve Social Security disability for the disabled and for the taxpayer. We've submitted those solutions as an amendment to this bill because there are real answers to be able to solve Social Security disability if you do the work, which we have actually done the work to prepare for this. But instead, this budget bill renews a few demonstration programs, changes a few names, transfers some funds from retirement Social Security over to disability Social Security, calls it reform. If you look at the way the actuarial tables work out, of the 100% that needs to be done to bring solvency, they do 1.5% of what needs to be done to bring the program to solvency. The estimate is 1.5% of the 100% that needs to be done. And it's called real significant disability reform. I wish it was because it's desperately needed. Everyone knows this Congress only seems to do anything when they have to. A deadline is coming to deal with Social Security disability. This is the time we have to do the reforms. This opportunity will not come around again for 7 years because this extends out this program for 7 years with almost no reforms at all. We're missing our window. These are the most vulnerable individuals in our society that are on disability. These are individuals that literally cannot work in the economy in any way, and they need our help and they need real reform in this program, and we have punted it. 1.5% of the reform that is needed to actually stabilize the program. What does real reform look like? It helps those stuck in the painful process of disability applications and gets them the help they need at the time they need it. Real reform looks like it helps those who game the system to get out of the system. It gives clarity, accountability, and oversight to the system itself. That's what real reform would look like. Let me give you a couple of examples. The grid, the way that's called the vocational grid, what is used to be able to determine if someone can work in the economy, it's not been updated since 1978. It needs to be updated not just now, it needs to be updated every 10 years to have a regular cycle of updating it, not every 40 years. But that's not required in this bill. We need to have good record keeping, evidence for disability. That's not required in this bill. We'd have to have this standard to be able to rotate off disability. to bring some clarity to it. Right now it's medical improvement, but the problem is there are no good records often for those individuals that are on disability, so there's no way to rotate off of it. You're permanently trapped in it because the records were so bad at the start. There's no change in that. But what does that look like in real life? Well, let me give you a couple of real life examples. In Puerto Rico, the U.S. Attorney's Office accepted a case for prosecution about 4 years ago. The Inspector General initiated a federal grand jury investigation working closely with the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, and the Puerto Rico Police Department. In August of 2013, 74 individuals, including 4 medical professionals and a non-attorney claimant representative, were indicted and arrested for their involvement in a large-scale disability fraud scheme. On January 15, 2015, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Puerto Rico announced the indictments of an additional 40 individuals, including a psychiatrist, for their alleged involvement in this conspiracy, and they undertook an early morning arrest operation for those individuals. All these individuals were apprehended, and at the end of it, they estimate the cost to the taxpayer is $100 million of fraud in that one case alone. In Huntington, West Virginia, in May of this year, Social Security Administration mailed letters to approximately 1,500 individuals, informing them of their need to redetermine their eligibility for Social Security disability. Many of those individuals have been on disability for years now, because the Social Security Administration, the Inspector General's office, noted that many of these individuals were put on in a case that did not match facts with what actually happened in their life. They had been led to believe by a representative, an attorney in this case, and by some fraudulent work behind the scenes of some physicians and some inside work of individuals within Social Security to be able to fast track them through the process. And what happened? Hundreds of millions of dollars in fraud. These things still continue. Nothing changes on this. I wish that this bill would correct some of these issues today, but it doesn't correct these issues. Those individuals were told by someone that they fit into the disabled category, only to find out later they had also been defrauded in the system. There's nothing in this bill mandating the Social Security Administration update its medical and vocational listings. There's nothing in this bill to prevent people who receive unemployment insurance, who by definition must be employable, from also receiving disability insurance, who by definition cannot also work. There's nothing in this bill to streamline the adjudication process or to eliminate second level of appeal, which is called reconsideration. Many individuals that are within the process that are legitimately disabled, that just want to have their case heard, get stuck in this long process. There are actually more appeals in Social Security Administration, in the Social Security Disability Program, than there is on death row, which puts people endlessly in this cycle of endless appeals, it feels like, year after year. And it continues to rack up the cost both for the taxpayer and the effect on those that are in disability. There's nothing in this bill to ensure that a claimant's medical record is well developed, so that when they come up for a continuing disability review, they can make an informed judgment to actually evaluate whether they're medically improved or not. There's nothing in this bill to conduct oversight of the administrative law judges or claimants or representatives. The bill increases the numbers of administrative law judges, but not the oversight. I'm not sure that many in this body are aware that some of the administrative law judges in this country have an overturn rate of 95% or higher, and we're adding more, but not increasing the oversight. There's no opportunity given for greater accountability or even to improve the judicial code of conduct here, a basic element of reform that should be in this. As for the claimant representatives, according to the Social Security Administration's Office of Inspector General, in the tax year 2013, the top 10 highest earning claimant representatives made $23 million. Remember that the payment for the claimant representatives comes directly out of the money that should go to the disabled individual, not from another fund. It's from the individual that should have received that money as disability. So the more the reps make, the less the tax money actually gets to the disabled. There's no change in this model. It continues to provide continuing funding for claimant representatives and attorneys, and continues to leave those in disability exposed. By the way, today, in Social Security Administration offices all around the country, They're processing the money from the disabled and sending a check to the representatives because though the reps are hired by the disabled individual, they're paid and processed by the federal workforce from the disabled person's money. We can do better than this. We should do better than this. Mr. President, this was not a deal that the American people are looking for. This is not a budget agreement that the people of Oklahoma say that fixes our debt and deficit issues and that stabilizes disability. This is a deal that's done, apparently, but not a deal that's done well. Based on where we are in debt and deficit, we need to do better. And I pray we do in the days ahead. We have much to get fixed. It's time to actually fix some things, not just to stay operational. Mr. President,